And let's get going because we've got a lot to cover and I want to make sure that we get it all covered so that I'm not sending you tons and tons of emails as we go. So this is the first time, by the way, I think there's about 20 of the essays in so far, and that's great. It's going to take me a couple of weeks to get through them all. I read them, I comment, and I use a rubric. So there are fewer comments than I put on last time because I'm grading. But it will probably take me about 2 weeks to get through them. And that's assuming everything goes well and there's not some kind of catastrophe. What could be worse than a pandemic? Well, there are worse things. So as far as other elements of this essay, I am just grading your essay. So some of you have put your bios there, and I'm really happy that you did, but think of your bio as a draft. I'm not grading it. And we'll come back together and we'll talk about that, and you can revise your bios. I've seen some really good examples, and I'll pull those up next week so that you can revise and we can have some sort of symmetry in our book. And think of your image as a suggestion, something you're thinking of using. Ultimately, we can't use any copyrighted photos. I don't know why I didn't think of that 2 weeks ago, but I did not. Oh, because it was only 2 weeks ago that my son-in-law said, you can make a Kindle book. And I said, that's an idea. So it's taking me a lot of time to think about all the elements of this. Ultimately, we can't use anything that's copyrighted because that is against the law. And we have to give attribution to any image that's not copyrighted. So let's say you've got your own image. That's totally fine. So you took a picture, you own that. You own the rights to that picture. Unsplash and Flickr are also fine, but we have to create an attribution for the photographer. It's sort of like giving credit to them. I've seen some amazing, amazing photos on Unsplash. I've seen some really good ones on Flickr. I skimmed through the images that you posted on the discussion board, and I really liked some of those photos that you had of family, of you and family, you and friends, places you've been. I think those are the best photos anyways. So just because something is on Google Images does not mean that it's free to use in a book that we're actually publishing. So there's that. The other thing, any questions about submitting the essay? Okay, then we're done talking about that. Here's the other stuff that's due this week. There is a discussion board post, and I'm asking you to write a video that essentially asks the question that we started out with. What is America and what is an American? And there's an organization called the Aspen Institute. And the head of that organization is Eric Liu. And these are issues he explores. Like, what does it mean to be American? How can we be more democratic? How can we create greater unity? What values do we want to support as America as we move forward? And so this is a video he did for one of their conferences, and it's a little long. It's 1 hour and 4 minutes. And when you write it, then you're going to give a short summary of it, and then you get to say something in response to it. And it could be about values that you think are American, or it could be commentary on how America is changing. He has a panel. It's not just him talking. It's a panel. There's a columnist from, I think, the Washington Post. And anyways, it's a very diverse panel. So, and then by Saturday, you respond to other people. There are also 2 paragraphs you're going to write about Teresa Thonney, and this is due on Saturday. One will be a rhetorical precis, which is a very short 4-sentence structured summary. Some of you have written these before, and if you have, you're probably groaning because they're so horrible, but they're useful. And so we'll just go with that. They are useful. So one is a 4-sentence summary, and the other is you're identifying a rhetorical strategy that she uses in her paper. By the way, you did a great job of identifying those in your journals, and so now you're back to doing those. And so this is probably the least exciting thing you are doing for homework this week. And then, of course, the reflection direction question, and then we're done. Next week, you're going to be reading What Every American Should Know by Eric Liu. And it's not due on Monday. On Monday, I'm going to talk about the prompt for the next project. But on Wednesday, you should be ready to discuss what every American should know. By the way, this slide deck is the same as the one we used for Monday, because through the wonders of Google Docs, it updates it. And so anyways, it's available. Here's a link to the Atlantic article. It's also available in your course reader. And the course reader allows you to just take notes on it. It's really easy to annotate. For some of you, this is an article that not only will you be doing a reading journal about, but you'll also be examining, some of you will be doing a research paper in response to this. So, questions about homework this week? So I would encourage you, as we go through this discussion, that you would just unmute yourself and ask questions as we go. If you are uncomfortable doing that, you can put your question in the chat and Alyssa will either answer it if it's a technical question, or she'll interrupt me so that I can answer it. And I appreciate that she does that. I don't have an Alyssa in my other class, and I feel really sad about that because it just makes it easier for me to interact with you. We're going to talk about Teresa Thonney, and then we're going to talk about the rhetorical precis. By the way, if you go to the Writing Center or you meet with Alyssa in the month of October, you can get up to 10 points of extra credit. It's not required. And you may actually want to meet with Alyssa or go to the Writing Center to talk about rhetorical strategies or rhetorical precis. So I'll just put that shout out. I think the link on the homepage to Alyssa's sign up page, I think that works now because I adjusted it from what she gave me. So let's talk about Teresa Thonney. You're going to be seeing a lot of papers that are just like Teresa Thonney's. They're going to come from academic research journals. They're going to be structured the way her research article is structured, and they're going to be dense, and they're going to be filled with research and data. And sometimes you're just going to ask yourself, I don't even know what they're saying, because the language is structured the way it is, and the vocabulary is new to you, and yeah, all of those things. So what I'm doing is I'm going to explain the structure to you, because there are a lot of common structures in these. And if you're looking for these common structures, they actually can help you follow what you're reading when you encounter these. And you'll encounter them for other classes, but we're going to be using them frequently. And in the next paper you write, you'll be required to use at least 3 relevant sources from this type of text. So they almost always start with an abstract. And an abstract is a short, concise summary. Teresa Thonney has one right under her title. And her abstract is just one sentence. And it just introduces, here's what she does, here's her argument, it's done. Most abstracts are somewhere in the range of 200 to 350 words. So they're longer. And the abstract, like I said, it's just a concise summary. Most of the time, your professors will not allow you to use the abstract in any essay you're writing, but it's still useful because if you're using academic research, and these articles can be anywhere from 10 to 50 pages, you don't want to read something that long and get to the end of it and say, wow, that was a waste of time. I don't think I can use that. By looking at the abstract, you can get a really good idea if it might be useful for you or not. And if you think it might be useful, you then go to the introduction, and by the time you're done with the introduction, you will know I can use it or not. So they begin with an abstract, they end with citations. I think Thonney has around, I don't know, 5 pages of citations. That's pretty typical. They could be longer than that. You could have 10, 15 pages of citations. Most of the time you don't have to pay attention to that. It's this IMRD structure that's really, really useful for you. Introduction, methodology, results, discussion. I have put them in the column there, IMRD, because yeah, there's actually a name for this, IMRAD. And the cool thing about this, when you're reading, I don't know if it's cool, it is to me, but probably not to you, is most of the time when you're reading these types of texts, they will actually have a heading that says introduction, methodology, results, discussion. And so those headings help guide you, and you can say, I just want to read the discussion, or I just want to read the introduction, or I need to evaluate the methodology, and you can figure out where those are. Introduction, the introduction in an essay like this does a lot of the same things that an introduction you're writing does. How is this similar to the introductions that you've written in? By the way, the introduction starts on page 347 and goes all the way to page 349. How is it similar? How is it different? Anybody? Erica, how is Thonney's introduction similar to what you wrote in high school?
I think it has a lot of the same structures, like a clear thesis and kind of listing what the purpose is. Not too much fluff, more to the point.
Yeah, definitely. Those are some similarities. How is this different? Cameron, how is this introduction that goes 2 full pages, how is it different than what you've written for high school essays?
Um, I mean, maybe the only one I can think of right now is just the length. I mean, usually we don't put that many details in it. It's just you kind of want to go quick to the point and explain like really quickly what you're going to talk about, so they have like a general like defined idea of what you're going to talk about.
Yeah, and I like how you said that she includes way more detail. Part of that is because the introduction is where she does the work of responding to what others have written. In fact, um, let me, her introduction does exactly what your introductions did in high school. She introduces a topic, she provides some background information that's concise, no fluff, and she provides direction for the rest of the paper. So in that, it's exactly what you did in high school. But there are those differences, the details. Um, Her background information includes what others have said on this topic. So she reviews, I don't know, 20 sources, what they've said, because she's got to show that she understands the conversation that she's entering into. She's got to show that she is familiar with the ongoing conversations about what college teachers teaching first year English should include in their discussion, because there's actually a lot of research on this topic. She's got to show that she's joining that conversation. She's not just making something up that doesn't consider the body of scholarship that already exists. She also has to show why those things matter, why her topic matters, why the conversations matter. And in reviewing this, she can say, here's what others have said, but here's what they haven't said. And she can say, not a lot of people have talked about universal characteristics of academic writing. They've talked about how their different disciplines are different. They've talked about, some have said you can teach generalities, some have said you can't, but they haven't talked about what might be similar. And so that allows her to come in and say, so you haven't talked about this, the scholarship has not talked about this, but I'm going to talk about this. I'm going to do research on what is similar so I can add to the conversation about what we should teach to first year students. So that's where this differs. And so she spends a lot of time reviewing that research, which makes sense when you understand her conventions and what she talks about, joining a conversation. She also provides a methodology section. Now, I said in a lot of research papers, an author would create a separate section and it would be labeled methodology. She has a very short section, and it's on page 348 in the middle of the page, right above a list of journals. And she says, to determine what rhetorical features appear in the prose of experienced academic writers, I analyzed 24 research articles, 4 articles from each of 6 disciplines: psychology, sports medicine, biology, marketing, literature, and engineering, and the articles were randomly selected from the following peer-reviewed journals. And so she lays out the parameters of her research and how she does this without bias. Why is a methodology section that sets up the parameters of research, why does it matter? Why is it important? What does it do for Thonney? Think about this. Rugine, what does this do for Thonney? How does it help her to lay out her methodology?
I believe it helps. It's clear for the reader to see what she's trying to kind of do in a way.
Yeah, it does help that she clarifies how she did her research. The clarifying is helpful. Faith, can you add anything to that?
I don't know. I'm thinking. Sorry.
No, that's okay. It's sort of a tough question. If this were science, why would that methodology section matter?
That's a good question that I also don't know the answer to because I don't know anything about science.
That's okay. That's okay. Lily, any thoughts on this?
Well, if it's scientific, then you need to be able to repeat the experiment, or it needs to be like well verified to be like valuable to other people.
Yeah, definitely. You have to be able to repeat the experiment to say, hey, this wasn't a one-off, that, like, I made these results come about. And by being really clear on the methodology, the parameters, whether it's in composition research or it's finding a cure for COVID or a vaccine, you have to be able to repeat the research, and somebody has to be able to evaluate, identify the variables, evaluate if perhaps there was a better way to do this, if there are any flaws in the methodology that might have led to that research. So by being upfront with her methodology, she shows she's fair, she's not biased. Anybody else could do this same research and maybe get the same results. And so remember, Aristotle says that one of the ways people build ethos is by seeming unbiased. She randomly selected the research articles. She identifies the different journals she did her research in. And in doing so, she says, you could do the same work and you would probably get the same results. So the results section is very, very useful. For her, it's all her sections, number 1 through 6. These are the results she got from examining all of those. And it's pretty easy to read. It has a lot of detail. It has a lot of analysis. If this were a scientific journal, it would be really different, because what she would be doing is she would be creating a lot of tables and graphs and statistical outcomes, and there wouldn't be a lot written because she would be expecting other experts to read those data and the data and the charts. And so if I'm reading that kind of research, I never took a stats class. Quite frankly, I can't read the charts and the graphs very well. I might skip ahead to the discussion section. And the discussion section is essentially the conclusion. But this isn't a conclusion that she just repeats what she already said. No, this is an academic discussion. And so what she's saying is, based on the results that I just got from my research, here is what we now know. Here's why it matters, and here's what we can do with it. That might be more research, that might be an action plan, that might be advantages. So this is what we're looking for from an academic discussion, not a repetition, but it's just based on all this research. Here's what we now know, here's why it matters, here's what we can do with these results. Questions about these sections? The headings, these are guides, and they're super useful. So even if you can't quite understand everything that's been said, you can look at the headings and you know what to expect. And if we know what we can expect, we can follow the rest of the essay. In fact, that is her second convention, is that writers state the value of their work and announce the plan for their paper. And they're announcing that plan for their paper in the introduction. Here's what I'm going to do. But they're also announcing the plan for their paper as they go. And now I'm going to provide 3 things. On the one hand, this, on the other hand, this. But the headings are one of the ways we do that. She does that. Why study these conventions? She cites Diller and Oates, and she says no first student is expected to write like discipline insiders when writing in entry-level courses that are pre-disciplinary in both theory and practice. And you should all be going, I do not have to sound like Teresa Thonney in my first year at university. But then she adds this: research indicates Students are rewarded when they produce prose that resembles that of experienced academic writers. So how are you rewarded when you can write a little less like you did in high school and a little more like Thonney writes? What kind of rewards might you have? Ariana?
People will take you more serious, maybe.
Yeah. A lot of my students have said that, that when they learn the principles that we discuss in class and they apply them in some of the other classes they're taking in their first year at SDSU, their professors take them more seriously. And it gives them that extra, that they seem more credible. What other kinds of rewards might there be? Sophia?
Sorry, I kind of don't understand the question just asked.
Okay, that's all right, Sophia. Matthias. So professors might take you more seriously, but what other kinds of rewards might there be?
I think that if you write like she's writing, or if you try to take some inspiration, you're just going to be able to expand the skills in terms of your writing. You'll be able to like kind of learn how to build something from scratch and also interact with other pieces of writing and research like she does, and being able to reach your own conclusions and expand those ideas to other people that need it.
Yeah, it really expands your rhetorical toolbox or your abilities to write in new ways that are different from what you wrote in high school, because this is not generally what's expected of students in high school. Any other thoughts on how this might be rewarding? Vivian? Okay. So I want to go over these really quickly, and I want to have time to talk about the rhetorical precis, which is very academic. She talks about how academic writers respond to what others have written. That doesn't mean that academic writing sounds conversational, because she talks about how you're joining a conversation. You're joining an academic conversation. You have to review, here's what they say, here's what I say. So it really is responsive. Why? Exactly what we talked about with Thonney. She has to demonstrate that she understands the ongoing conversations. Because if she doesn't show that she understands what people have already said, they're not likely to take her very seriously. Thonney notes that writers often struggle with the kind of writing they're asked to do at university. And she says one of the ways we can prepare students for learning across the curriculum is by giving assignments that involve summarizing, synthesizing, attributing writers, and commenting on what they have said. And so that means that I'm going to give you a lot of assignments that ask you to summarize. I'm going to ask you to create assignments that summarize claims and how authors built them. And you're going to do that in order for you to comment on them. This next assignment that we're going to do, the next essay, is going to be a research essay, and you're going to be researching what have other authors said about American values, what it means to be an American, what it means to have a democracy, how we can promote democracy, how we can promote equality and equity. You're going to have to think not just about what you think, your opinion, but you're going to have to review what others have said to show that you're adding to a conversation. Academic writers state the value of their work and they announce the plan for their papers. Several of you in your journals said, you know, like when she states, this essay is about, or I examine these things, that those things, that way of writing would have been frowned on in your high school papers. It's not frowned on when you're doing academic writing in my class, because I want you to practice some of these strategies. In fact, that's why I assign a rhetorical précis. Even explicit, this research is valuable because is accepted in academic writing. Why? Because it shows that you know your value and you can, the value of the ideas, and you can pass them on to others. And sometimes that's what they need. And if you don't know the value of what you're writing, that won't come through in your writing. She also includes this idea that academic writers acknowledge that others might disagree. Now, you've been taught to do that by introducing counter arguments, which is a very good thing to do, but generally speaking, it's not really acknowledging that others might disagree with you. It's just saying, here's this other person who disagrees, and here's why that person is wrong. Or they're right about part of it, but they're wrong about the other part. No, her idea is much more complicated, because it means that she's talking about using qualifiers. These are words that soften, that make what you are saying less absolute. And some of you noted in your journals that that didn't really make sense. And so I want to introduce this idea to you. If I say research proves that children who play violent video games will commit violent crimes, and when I say that research proves that, none of you believe the research. Why? Because half of you have played violent video games and you have not killed anybody or beat anybody up. And I'm really happy about that. And I don't care that you play violent video games. But look how much more credible that sounds if I say some research suggests that children who play graphic violent video games may have a tendency to commit violent crimes if they have been victims of violent crimes themselves. All of a sudden you think to yourself, maybe. Because I'm saying some suggests, if I'm putting qualifiers, adjectives that restrict. So it's sort of like it's restricting. It's saying not always, but in some cases. By the way, that thing I just said, I made it up completely just for the purpose of providing an example of the power of qualifiers. They're also known as hedges, and Thonney names some of those in her paper. Academic writers adopt a voice of authority. How do they do this? They write in third person and first person. And that first person isn't in my opinion or I think, it is I argue that, I claim, I examine. So it's authoritative. Here's what I'm doing. They also use third person. What they don't use is second person. Academic writing, and many of you noted, this is not engaging. This doesn't make you want to read it. It's not emotional. There's no attempt for Teresa Thonney to connect with her audience. She writes as a distant expert, writing to other experts. Another way that they demonstrate their authority is by concise writing, removing all unnecessary words, removing repetitive or redundant words, switching words around, using plain, simple language, Be specific, be concise. So it's both of those things. And she provides a few examples. Meniscal healing that was incomplete versus incomplete meniscal healing. Sociologists who are feminists, feminist sociologists. An outdoor site that is exposed, exposed outdoor site. Eliminating a few words is helpful. Here's another one that you might be using. She is making the claim that, has a lot of words, but in academic writing, it would just be she claims. And this is a tough habit to get into, but it is a habit that will make your writing sound more academic. Academic writers use academic specific vocabulary, and that can be tough because you're not used to using this vocabulary, but you will get used to it. So some of that is discipline specific, but some of it is what she calls lexical bundles. Lexical means word bundles, according to, as a result, those types of frames and those types of phrases. And you'll see them over and over and over again. And of course, tables, graphs, images that illustrate the ideas. Lots and lots of those. She does not, but the sciences, the social sciences, they do. Questions about anything I have said so far? So let's talk about the rhetorical précis. I'm curious, how many of you have already used a rhetorical précis in the past? Just show of hands. I know, I can't see your hands. Sienna's shaking her head, but a few of you have raised metaphorical hands. I don't know which ones of those you are. Yeah, Alyssa has used them, Jenny has used them, Ariana's used them. Jenny, do you just love these rhetorical précis? Tell us about them.
I don't really remember how to write one, but I definitely use them in my AP language class, and yeah.
Ariana, do you remember what they were like to write? You don't have to tell us how to write them, just how you felt writing them.
I felt like they were challenging because you had to be concise while also making sure to hit all of the points that you needed to, but I also found them very useful because they're very to the point.
I appreciate that you gave a positive. Most people, when I ask that question, do not give a positive for the rhetorical précis. Alyssa, do you just love them? Alyssa's blinking. Not so much. Let me show you what they do. They are challenging, but they're useful. And let me go back to share screen. This is what they do. It's a rhetorical précis is a concise, very structured 4-sentence summary that introduces a text for someone who hasn't read it and simultaneously provides practice with several conventions of academic writing for student writers. And so you will get that sense of writing concisely. You will get that sense of dense writing. You will get to respond to, like introduce what others have said. It doesn't do synthesis, it's just summary. And so there's no quotations. And ultimately, you'll be able to use some of these sentences in essays. Ariana said, like it gave her practice using this, and she was able to take some of these principles and replicate them or modify them in the writing that she did. So this is a rhetorical précis. I don't know why I can't change slides. I should be able to. Because this is the last slide. So what I need is a different slide. Sorry about that. We're running out of time. I thought I had it up, but I did not. Let me make that go away. Let me pull this up. Sorry about that. This slideshow is actually on Canvas, and so you'll be able to access it along with everything else, because you will be doing a rhetorical précis for Teresa Thonney. When you are doing this, you are going to use active verbs like listing, identifying, comparing, describing, those kinds of verbs. You're going to stay away from verbs like saying, talking about, claiming, informing, because you're focused on what an author is doing. Here is the first sentence. And you'll notice that we're providing all kinds of information in the first sentence. In her article titled Teaching the Conventions of Academic Discourse, published in Teaching English in the Two-Year College, English professor Teresa Thonney discusses blank and argues that blank. And so I could fill that in by she discusses universal characteristics of academic writing across the disciplines and argues that it is valuable to teach these to first-year students who help them succeed as they move through the university. And so you can see that using this allows me to provide all kinds of information while giving a very concise overview. The second sentence asks you to use 3 different active verbs using the ing form. She supports this claim. What is she doing to build that argument that there are universal characteristics that should be taught to first-year students? Don't give me rhetorical strategies here. Don't give me claims, give me what she's doing. So I might say something like, reviewing the research about, reviewing what, she supports this claim by reviewing what first-year students are often taught in their classrooms, identifying common characteristics of academic writing, and providing examples of how this might benefit students as they move into higher level classes. So every time I'm using an ing verb and every time I'm developing it, not just the ing verb, but I'm developing the idea. Question about this sentence? The third sentence focuses on an overview of what she's doing and how she wants her audience to respond. So I might say something like, Thonney's purpose is to describe how academic research is similar in order to persuade English teachers to include this discussion in their first-year classes. So it's very much, here's what she's doing, here's how she wants her audience to respond. The last sentence is generally the easiest, and it's also the least useful if you were using these kinds of sentences in an essay. Unless it's a rhetorical strategy essay, she adopts a blank tone in order to persuade. So we could say she adopts an objective tone in order to persuade English teachers who often get frustrated with students' apparent lack of understanding of college writing. Questions about anything to do with the rhetorical précis? Questions about what's due this week? All right, then. I have nothing else to say. I have fun getting your first tattoo, Corey, and Pierce Deers, Brina, and anything else you all have planned. So thank you very much. You're free to go. I'll stick around for a few more minutes. And if you have questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Litzy.
I don't know if anyone asked this at the start of class, but I can't get into the week 7